I think I didn't do anything wrong, just kissed someone I once loved, and now my husband has served me papers like I'm the villain. It all started at our high school reunion, and by the end of that night, he walked out without a word. This morning, the envelope with his legal demands was on our kitchen table. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm not sure why everyone is acting like I ruined my whole life over one small moment, because honestly, it didn't even feel like a real mistake at the time. I kissed my old flame at our high school reunion, yes, but it wasn't dramatic or romantic or any of the things people are now saying. It was quick, it was familiar, and it was nothing compared to the storm that came after. I thought it was harmless, something Thomas would probably shrug off once he calmed down. Instead, he walked out that same night without raising his voice, without asking questions, without even looking back at me. The part that still shocks me is what happened the next morning. There they were on our kitchen table, documents, neatly stacked, with my name printed on the front. Legal papers, real ones, cold, official, and nothing like the emotional reaction I had expected from my husband. I stood there staring at them, feeling this strange mix of anger and disbelief. How could one small kiss turn into all this? How could Thomas move so fast, so quietly, like he had been preparing for this long before I even knew something was wrong? I walked into the reunion expecting nothing more than some cheap music, old faces, and a chance to feel important for a night. The gym looked almost the same as it did years ago, just with dimmer lights, a rented speaker system, and plastic tablecloths that tried too hard to seem elegant. People were already gathering in little circles, pretending they hadn't spent the last decade silently competing with one another on social media. I told myself I was there to reconnect, to show support, to catch up. But honestly, I wanted people to look at me and think I had done well for myself. I wanted to feel admired again. Thomas walked in beside me, but he may as well have been a ghost. He stood stiff, hands in his pockets, scanning the room like he was checking for fire exits. I nudged him and said something about trying to have fun. He nodded without enthusiasm. It annoyed me. He always acted like social events were chores, even when the event was about my past just as much as his present. Then I saw Lucas. He was across the room talking to two classmates, laughing in that easy way he always had. When he noticed me, his smile widened, warm and familiar. Something in my chest tightened, recognition maybe, or nostalgia, or maybe just the thrill of being seen. I don't get that feeling at home anymore. Thomas looked at me only when I needed something practical. Lucas looked at me like he remembered exactly who I used to be. Lucas came over almost as soon as he could. He asked how life had been, and I told him it was good, maybe too quickly. He said he remembered how I used to brighten every room. I laughed, brushing his compliment aside, but secretly enjoying it. Thomas walked over at one point and tried to join the conversation, but Lucas talked smoothly and confidently, while Thomas's short answers made him seem awkward. I could feel him shrinking beside me, and I hated that. Not because I cared about his discomfort, but because it made me look dull by association. When Lucas suggested stepping outside for some air, I agreed without thinking. I told Thomas I needed to make a call. He hesitated, asked if everything was okay. I said yes, and told him he was worrying too much. He didn't argue, but his eyes lingered on me long enough for me to feel judged. Outside, the night air was cool and quiet. The courtyard lights cast soft shadows against the walls. It felt private, like we had stepped outside the world just for a moment. Lucas asked about my job, my marriage, my kids. I answered politely, avoiding the empty parts. He told me I deserved excitement, that he always thought I had a spark no one should let fade. I felt both flattered and exposed. He asked if I ever thought about the past. I said sometimes. He said he still remembered our last summer together before college. His voice softened, and I felt this strange warmth spreading through me. I liked being remembered. I liked feeling like someone once thought I was irreplaceable. Then it happened. The kiss. It was quick, almost gentle, like a memory taking shape. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment. It wasn't deep or passionate. It was familiar, simple. For a second, I even smiled because it felt harmless, like a secret no one needed to know. I didn't feel guilt. Not then. Not even for a second. I pulled away and said something light to make it seem like no big deal. He looked a little surprised, maybe curious, but not regretful. He said he hoped I was happy. I told him I mostly was. He nodded with that knowing expression that made me feel seen in a way Thomas never managed. When I went back inside, I felt normal at first, but the room's energy shifted almost instantly. Thomas stood near the door with a tense expression. His jaw was tight, and his posture was different. Something inside me dipped. I asked if he was okay. He said someone told him I had been outside a long time with Lucas. I laughed and said classmates were dramatic. I added that he imagined problems because he always worried too much. He didn't argue back. He just turned his face slightly, then walked away toward the bathroom. His silence irritated me more than any accusation could have. I would have preferred he demanded explanations or raised his voice. That at least would show he cared. But quiet felt like judgment. The rest of the night, Thomas barely looked at me. On the drive home, he stared at the road with a steady, distant expression. I said he was overreacting. He said nothing. I told him the reunion was supposed to be fun. Still nothing. I even brought up how he never supports my social life, but his eyes stayed fixed forward. At home, he walked straight to the living room, leaving me to take off my heels alone in the entryway. I followed him after a minute, asking if he wanted tea. He shook his head. I asked why he was acting distant. He said he needed time to think. Cold, flat, unmoving. When my phone buzzed minutes later, I glanced down without caring who might see. It was Lucas. Hope I didn't cause trouble. The message made me smile for a second. Thomas saw it. His expression darkened, not with anger, but with something heavier. Disappointment, maybe. He didn't ask anything. He stood up, said he was going to bed, and left me standing there. Later, when I joined him, he was sitting up in bed, staring at the wall. I asked if we were going to keep acting strange. He said he had a question and wanted an honest answer. I told him he could ask anything. He asked if I kissed Lucas. The question hit like a slap. My mind scrambled. I said no immediately, too quickly. He listened, face blank. I told him someone must have been trying to stir drama. I told him people love to exaggerate. I told him he was imagining things. Then he did something that scared me more than yelling would have. He reached for his phone, tapped the screen, and said someone sent him a photo. He didn't show it. He didn't accuse me further. He just turned the phone face down on his nightstand and said he needed space. My stomach dropped, but instead of apologizing, I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, trying to convince myself he was blowing everything out of proportion. I told myself it wasn't a serious kiss, not the kind that destroys marriages. I told myself he'd wake up calmer, but he didn't. At breakfast, he moved like a robot, packing lunches, helping the kids with shoes, barely looking at me. When Milo asked why Daddy was sad, I said he was tired. Thomas corrected me and said he was fine. That quiet correction hit harder than any argument. When he left for work, he didn't kiss me goodbye. He didn't even look back. I tried to drown my worry in conversation. I called my sister, Iris, and told her what happened. She said it sounded like nothing and that Thomas needed to relax. She reassured me the kiss wasn't a big deal. I agreed eagerly. It felt good to have someone echo my logic. But when I went to pick up laundry later that afternoon, I found something in Thomas's jacket pocket, a business card from a family law office. I froze, staring at it longer than necessary. A chill moved through me. I told myself it was probably connected to some coworker's divorce, that he must have picked it up accidentally, that it had nothing to do with us. Still, my hand shook when I put it back. That night, Thomas went to bed early without a word. When I joined him, he lay still on his side, his back facing me, his breathing calm and steady. I reached out a little, wanting to touch his shoulder, but something about the distance between us felt dangerous. Something told me if I touched him now, it would be like stepping into cold water I wasn't ready for. So I pulled my hand away. I didn't know then that Thomas had already begun writing down everything I said since the reunion. I didn't know he had started documenting my shifting answers. I didn't know he had already saved the photo. While I sat there convincing myself nothing serious happened, he was already building something quiet and steady, something I never expected. I thought the kiss was small. I thought Thomas was dramatic. I thought everything would blow over in a few days. I had no idea that this small moment I treated like nothing had already begun to break our life apart piece by piece, and that Thomas, silent and calm, was letting it happen without telling me why. The next morning, Thomas had already left for work before I even got out of bed. Normally, he waited until I came downstairs so we could at least exchange a quick goodbye. But that day, the house felt strangely empty. The coffee pot was still warm, and the kids' breakfast plates were neatly stacked in the sink. He had moved through the morning like a ghost, doing everything he usually did, but leaving no trace of himself. I told myself it was because he was still tired from the reunion, still overthinking, still taking everything too seriously. I tried to shrug it off as I got ready for work, but the silence felt like something heavy pressing on my chest. I kept remembering the business card in his jacket pocket, the way he kept his face blank when I denied the kiss, the photo he claimed someone had sent him. At work, I told the story in a way that made me sound like the victim. I said Thomas had gotten jealous at the reunion for no reason. I told my coworkers he cornered me afterward, asking questions like some detective trying to catch me in a lie. I said I felt suffocated by how suspicious he was acting. They reacted exactly how I hoped they would. Mara, who sits at the front desk, said Thomas needed to work on his confidence. Julia said men always got weird when their wives got attention from someone else. I nodded at all of it. I didn't tell them about the kiss. I didn't tell them about the photo. I just let them assume Thomas was being unreasonable. By lunchtime, I had built a whole narrative where Thomas was the one creating problems. I even added little details when they asked how he reacted, saying he gave me looks all night and made everything awkward. It wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. Not in the way I saw it. In the afternoon, I stepped out for coffee with my coworker Elise. She asked how things were at home, and I said Thomas and I hadn't talked much since the reunion. She asked if I had done something wrong, and I laughed, telling her the only thing I did wrong was exist near another man. Elise rolled her eyes and said Thomas needed to trust me more. Hearing it from someone else made me feel justified. It made me feel like I was right all along. But when I got home, that confidence faded. Thomas didn't greet me. He was sitting on the couch with his laptop open, typing something. When he heard me come in, he didn't look up. He just asked if I could keep the noise down because he had work to finish. I told him I thought we needed to talk. He said maybe later. The way he spoke, calm, distant, polite, felt more punishing than if he had yelled. I told myself he was being dramatic. When he finally closed his laptop, I asked why he was acting like a stranger. He said he needed space to think clearly. I told him he already had enough space, and that he was making me feel unwelcome in my own home. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He simply got up and went upstairs to check on the kids. The distance between us didn't feel like a pause. It felt like a wall. I called my sister, Iris, because she always tells me what I want to hear. I explained the situation in the most flattering way possible. I told her Thomas was blowing the whole thing out of proportion and making me feel guilty over nothing. She asked if I kissed Lucas, and I said no instantly. My voice didn't even shake. I think I half believed it in that moment. Iris said Thomas was acting pathetic and that I shouldn't let him control me. She said men like him always panicked when they felt their wives had options. I let her words sink in. They made me feel bold, powerful even. After dinner, which was painfully quiet, Thomas finally spoke. He asked if the message from Lucas meant anything. I told him Lucas was just being polite. He asked why Lucas would think he caused trouble. I said Lucas was dramatic. He asked again if anything happened outside. I sighed loudly and said he needed to stop interrogating me. Each answer I gave felt like laying another brick in a wall I didn't realize I'd soon be trapped behind. The kids sensed the tension. Milo kept asking if we were mad at each other. I told him Daddy was tired from work. Thomas didn't correct me this time. He just stayed quiet, which somehow made everything worse. Tessa clung to Thomas's leg the entire evening, refusing to come to me when I reached for her. That irritated me more than it should have. By the next morning, Thomas's silence had settled into something cold and consistent. He moved around the kitchen, like every step was carefully measured. I tried to make small talk, but he only responded with short, clipped answers. He wasn't cruel, he was simply absent. At work, I tried to vent again, but something felt different. Mara listened, but she didn't jump to defend me this time. She asked if maybe Thomas sensed something real. I brushed it off quickly, telling her people were spreading rumors. She didn't press, but I could tell she wasn't convinced. Then, during my lunch break, I got a message from a friend who also attended the reunion. She asked if everything was okay between me and Thomas. I said yes. She sent a follow-up. People are talking about what happened outside with Lucas. My heart thudded. I asked what exactly they were saying. She said she wasn't sure, but that someone claimed they saw us close together. I quickly typed back that nothing happened. She replied with a hesitant, "Okay," which made my skin prickle. Rumors were spreading faster than I expected. When I got home, I tried to bring up the gossip, hoping Thomas would dismiss it. Instead, he said he already heard versions of the story from co-workers. He said he didn't want to talk about it. His calmness unnerved me. I wanted him to show some emotion, to get angry, to tell me how he really felt. But he wouldn't give me anything. I felt powerless, and I hate feeling powerless, so I tried something spiteful. I told him if he kept acting cold, people would start assuming he had something to hide too. He looked at me for a moment, then said he wasn't interested in hiding anything. His tone was so steady, so firm, that it rattled me. That night, when I went to fold laundry, something fell from his jacket pocket. I reached down and saw a folded slip of paper, notes written in his handwriting. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the dates. One said, reunion night, another, morning after, another, conversation. Timing changed. Next to each line were little observations about things I said. I felt a jolt of heat rush through me. He was writing things down. He was documenting me. When Thomas came into the bedroom, I asked why he was making notes. He said it helped him think clearly. I asked what that meant. He said he didn't want to say anything he couldn't support later. I told him that sounded paranoid. He said it sounded responsible. That answer shook me. I tried to change the narrative again. I said he was letting gossip control him. I said he was hurting the kids by being distant. I said he was pushing me away on purpose. Typical deflection, things I usually said whenever arguments leaned in directions I didn't like. But this time he didn't react the way he used to. He didn't apologize. He didn't comfort me. He didn't try to calm the argument. He simply said he needed clarity before making any big decisions. I asked what big decisions he meant. He didn't answer. He only said he had a meeting the next morning and preferred to sleep early. When he turned off the light and rolled onto his side, his back facing me again, something inside me tightened, chilled. For the first time, the silence felt like something irreversible. For the first time, I wondered, not if he would forgive me, but if he even wanted to. And for the first time, I had the uneasy sense that Thomas, the man who once let me win every argument, had already begun preparing a future where my explanations no longer mattered at all. Dinner with our friends was supposed to be the thing that eased all the tension. At least, that's what I told myself as I got ready, putting on makeup with slow, careful strokes to look calm and in control. Thomas had agreed to go, but everything about him felt muted. His voice, his movements, even the way he buttoned his shirt. He said it would be good for the kids to spend time with my mother, and good for us to be around familiar faces. But his tone said it was just an obligation, something he was willing to endure rather than enjoy. We arrived at the restaurant a few minutes late, and everyone was already seated. Our friends waved us over with the usual cheerfulness, but their smiles faltered just slightly when they took in the way Thomas walked behind me instead of beside me. He sat down quietly, offering a polite nod while I did most of the talking. I said we were just tired from a long week. Thomas didn't correct me, but he didn't support the story either. He simply sipped his water and looked down. Throughout dinner, I tried to steer conversations away from the reunion, but people kept bringing it up. They asked who we saw, who looked different, who looked exactly the same. I gave light, polite answers, keeping the tone casual, pretending everything was normal. But the whole time, Thomas remained almost silent, responding only when someone asked him something directly. And even then, he kept his answers short and flat. I started feeling embarrassed by his quietness, like he was making us look bad on purpose. So I tried to lighten the mood the way I usually did, with jokes. I mentioned how Thomas never liked social events. I said he turns serious the second music starts playing. People chuckled a little. Then I added that he was probably still tired from staying up all night, worrying about who talked to me at the reunion. The table went silent for a second. Our friend Mark awkwardly cleared his throat. Another friend laughed softly, but it was the kind of laugh people make when they don't know where to look. Thomas didn't laugh at all. He didn't even shift in his seat. He just stared at his plate, unmoving. I felt irritation burn in my chest. He couldn't even laugh a little, not even to make the tension less obvious. Trying to recover the moment, I kept going. I said something about how Thomas gets jealous over nothing, how he reads too much into things, and how he once got suspicious because I took too long at the grocery store. I expected everyone to laugh. Normally they did. Normally they found it relatable or harmless, but instead I could see the discomfort building. Christy glanced at Thomas and then glanced away. Dave started fiddling with his napkin. Even Iris, who had joined us at the last minute, gave me a small warning look from across the table. But I ignored it. I was already too deep into the story, and I wanted people on my side. I wanted them to see Thomas as unreasonable, the way I had framed him earlier to my co-workers and sister. Thomas finally spoke. Not loudly, not angrily, just calmly. He said he didn't remember the grocery store incident the way I did. He said maybe I was exaggerating. He said it gently, but something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. He wasn't defending himself. He was correcting the narrative. Right there, in front of our friends. I felt heat crawl up my neck, so I did what I always did when I felt my image slipping. I doubled down. I sighed loudly and said, Thomas always took things too personally. I said he never understood jokes, that he was touchy lately, and making everything harder than it needed to be. And then, because I couldn't stand the silence hanging in the air, I made one more jab about him, overthinking little things like conversations with old classmates. The second the words left my mouth, I saw several faces shift. People didn't laugh, they didn't nod, they didn't even pretend to be entertained. Instead, their eyes flicked toward Thomas with genuine sympathy. Sympathy. For him. Not for me. I hated it instantly. Thomas didn't say anything back. He just placed his fork down, reached for his glass, and took a slow drink. His hands didn't shake. His expression didn't change. That calmness again. It felt like standing in front of a wall that refused to move. After dinner, when everyone stepped out to say goodbye, Christy pulled me aside. She asked quietly if everything was okay. I said yes, of course. She looked unconvinced. She said she noticed Thomas seemed hurt during dinner. I told her she was imagining things. She didn't argue, but her silence said she didn't believe me. On the drive home, Thomas didn't turn on the radio like he usually does. The car felt heavier than it had before dinner. I told him he made me look like a villain tonight. He said he didn't intend to. I told him he embarrassed me by acting so tense. He said he simply didn't want to lie in front of our friends. I told him he was acting sensitive and unreasonable. He didn't respond. He kept his hand steady on the wheel, eyes forward. At home, he helped put the kids to bed without speaking to me. When he finally came downstairs, I confronted him again. I asked why he couldn't just laugh like everyone else. He said he didn't find jokes about our marriage funny. I told him he was making a small issue into a disaster. He said it didn't feel small. He said trust wasn't something he could joke about. His voice wasn't loud or angry, just steady in a way that made me feel strangely exposed. I tried to regain control. I said if he kept acting like this, people would think he was the problem. He didn't even flinch. He simply said he wasn't worried about what people thought anymore. That scared me more than anything he had said so far. Later that night, while he was brushing his teeth, I checked his jacket again, half expecting to find the business card gone, proof that I had imagined everything. But the card was still there, and next to it, a folded sheet of paper with more notes, more dates, more observations. He was documenting things, tracking them carefully. I stared at the paper, realizing he wasn't angry, he was preparing. When he walked into the room, I quickly placed the paper back. He didn't ask what I was doing. He didn't ask anything at all. He just climbed into bed with that same careful distance as before. I asked if he wanted to talk. He said maybe tomorrow. I asked if he was still upset. He said he wasn't sure what he was feeling yet. I told him he needed to stop shutting me out. He said shutting me out wasn't his intention. He just needed clarity. Then he turned his back to me again. For the first time since the reunion, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Thomas wasn't avoiding me. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't overreacting. He was thinking, planning, pulling away inch by inch while pretending everything was fine for the kids' sake. And I hated that I didn't know what he was planning. I hated even more that he seemed certain I wouldn't like it. Thomas started waking up earlier, before the kids, before me, before the sun even began lighting the windows. At first, I thought he was just having trouble sleeping, but then I noticed he always left the house with a folder tucked under his arm or a notebook in his hand. He didn't hide it, but he didn't explain it either. When I asked where he was going, he simply said he had errands. When I asked what errands, he said personal ones. That answer told me nothing, and the calmness in his voice made me uneasy. At home, he moved like someone following a quiet plan. He checked emails more often, kept his phone closer, and didn't leave his laptop open like he used to. He wasn't paranoid, he was focused, polite, controlled. And that scared me more than anger ever could. I tried to pull him back into normal life. I suggested we all go out for ice cream after dinner. He said he had things to finish. I asked if he could at least sit with me while I watched a show. He said he was tired and needed to rest early. Every answer felt rehearsed, like he was choosing words carefully so I couldn't twist them. He had never guarded himself against me before. One evening, after the kids went to bed, I told him we needed to talk. He said he agreed, but then he just watched me quietly, letting me speak first. That alone threw me off balance. I was used to interrupting him, not him waiting for me like I was being evaluated. I told him he was letting rumors get into his head. I said people at the reunion were exaggerating. I said Lucas barely mattered in my life. He nodded through all of it, not disagreeing, not agreeing, just listening. When I finished, he asked one question: why my story about the courtyard kept changing. My chest tightened. I hadn't realized he had noticed. I told him he must have misremembered. He said he'd written down exactly what I said each time. Calm, matter of fact, no accusation. He wasn't trying to catch me. He had already caught me. I felt something hard and defensive rise in me. I told him no healthy person writes down conversations with their own spouse. He said he did it because he needed clarity, because I kept saying different things, because he no longer trusted the surface of what I told him. Hearing him say that, out loud, without hesitation, made me panic. I tried shifting blame again. I said his cold behavior pushed me away. I said, if he hadn't acted so distant at the reunion, the whole thing wouldn't have happened. I said he had created the environment where small mistakes felt tempting. He looked at me with this expression I hated, an expression that said he saw through every word. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse me. He just asked what mistake I meant. The room felt too quiet. I told him I meant the tension, the misunderstanding, the drama, anything but the actual kiss. He didn't push further. He just nodded, as if confirming something in his mind. The next day, I noticed him uploading files onto a flash drive before leaving for work. I asked what he was doing. He said nothing I needed to worry about. When I pressed, he said it was private and walked out the door before I could respond. He had never walked away from me mid-sentence before. At work, I vented again, but this time it didn't feel satisfying. Elise asked if I wanted things with Thomas to get better, or if I just wanted to be right. I told her she didn't understand. She said maybe I wasn't being honest with myself. It annoyed me so much I didn't speak to her the rest of the afternoon. During my break, I checked my phone and saw a message from Lucas. He asked if things were okay. I didn't reply. I didn't want Thomas to see another notification from him. But just seeing Lucas's name made me feel tense. I'd told too many lies, woven too many versions of the story. The truth hung over me like a quiet threat. When I got home, Thomas was sitting at the kitchen table with the kids, helping Milo with a school project. He looked calm, focused, happy even. Tessa sat on his lap, giggling as he drew something for her. I stood there watching them, feeling something sharp twist in my stomach. They looked stable, like they didn't need me. After bedtime, I asked him where he had gone earlier in the morning. He said he had spoken to a professional. I asked what kind of professional. He said legal. My heart skipped. I tried to laugh it off, saying he was being dramatic and throwing around big words to scare me. He said he had no interest in scaring me. He just wanted information. I asked if he was planning to leave me. He said he was planning to protect himself. That word, protect, made my hands go cold. I told him he was overreacting to a moment that meant nothing. He asked why I kept lying about it if it meant nothing. That question made me snap. I said I wasn't lying, that he was twisting everything. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just said he had heard enough and walked away. That night, I barely slept. Every time he shifted in bed, I felt anxiety spike in my chest. The next few days, I noticed more signs. Papers disappearing from his desk. New documents in a folder he kept in his car. A scheduled appointment on his phone, labeled simply meeting. Thomas wasn't impulsive. He was organized. He was preparing for something. And I hated that I didn't know what. One afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope addressed to him. I reached for it, but Thomas took it from my hands before I could open it. Not angrily, just firmly. He said it was private. I said nothing in marriage should be private. He said some things had to be. That answer stung deeper than I expected. He placed the envelope on top of his folder and went upstairs without explaining anything else. Later, when I tried to approach him, he said he was going to bed early. I said we needed to talk. He said we would, soon. His voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded resolved. The next morning, as he got ready for his meeting, I asked one last time what it was about. He buttoned his shirt, adjusted his tie, and said he was finalizing details. I asked what details. He said he'd tell me later. He left before I could stop him. The silence in the house after the door closed felt different from every silence before. It wasn't cold or angry. It was decisive. Like something had reached a breaking point without me noticing exactly where. I tried to calm myself by repeating the same lie I had been telling for days. It was just one kiss, just one moment, just one misunderstanding. But Thomas wasn't acting like a man hurt by a misunderstanding. He was acting like a man preparing for a controlled exit, one he had thought through from every angle. And for the first time since the reunion, I felt a terrible, undeniable fear. I had pushed him too far. And he wasn't coming back to the place where my excuses still worked. Thomas returned from his meeting later than usual, wearing the same steady expression he'd been carrying for days. Not angry, not sad, just calm in a way that made my stomach curl. He placed a stack of papers on the kitchen counter, aligning the edges so precisely it almost felt deliberate. The kids were in the living room watching a cartoon, unaware that something was shifting in the air. I asked him how the meeting went. He said it went as expected. Nothing more. I waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Instead, he went upstairs to change, leaving the papers where they sat like a silent warning. When he came back down, I positioned myself in front of the counter and tapped the stack lightly. I asked what it was. He said it contained information we needed to discuss. His voice was gentle, almost soft, but that softness felt sharp, like I was hearing the last echoes of something before it disappeared. I told him he was scaring me. He said that wasn't his intention. I told him he was acting like he didn't trust me. He said he couldn't trust my words anymore, only actions and facts. Something inside me twisted at that. Thomas had always taken what I said at face value. Always. Now he was looking at me like someone he had to evaluate. He asked if we could sit at the table. I didn't like the formality of it, but I followed. He slid the stack of papers toward me. Slow, controlled. I picked it up, expecting it to be something dramatic or exaggerated. Something he would use to guilt me. But when I looked down at the text, my breath caught. My name. His name. Separation terms. Temporary custody structure. Financial protection measures. Summaries of documented evidence. I stared at the words, unable to process them fast enough. He said he wasn't filing anything yet. Not today. Not without giving me a chance to understand the situation. He said he had spoken with legal professionals. He said they advised him to gather every detail. He said he intended to follow the law exactly as written from this point on. I told him this was insane, that he was throwing away our marriage over nothing. He said it wasn't nothing. It was betrayal, dishonesty, and public humiliation. I said it was just a simple kiss, not an affair. He said the difference didn't matter when lies kept shifting every time he asked a question. My hands trembled, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I said he should have confronted me earlier instead of planning all this behind my back. He said he tried, several times. He said I had given him different answers each time, each one more convenient for me than the last. He said he needed to protect himself and the kids from instability. Instability. He used the word like I was a storm that couldn't be predicted. I flipped through the pages, each one hitting harder than the last. There were dates, notes, statements I had said. There were copies of text messages, my messages. He had even printed the photo from the reunion someone sent him, the one he never showed me. Seeing it on paper, seeing myself leaning in, Lucas's hand on my arm, made my stomach drop. It looked different when I wasn't telling myself the comforting version. I told him the picture didn't show everything. He said it showed enough. Then he showed me something that made my throat close. A written summary of what he intended as a temporary custody arrangement. His proposal, based entirely on stability and schedule consistency. He wasn't trying to take the kids away, but he wasn't letting me use them as an excuse anymore either. I said he was doing this to punish me. He said he was doing this to protect himself. I said he was being cruel. He said he was being responsible. I said he was destroying our family. He said I started that the moment I walked outside with Lucas. His tone never changed. It was all steady, factual, collected, like he had removed emotion from the equation entirely. I couldn't find anything to latch on to. No anger to argue against, no tears to soften me, no confusion to take advantage of. Just clarity. And that clarity made me feel suddenly very small. I tried a different tactic, tears. I let my voice tremble. I said I made a mistake because I felt neglected. I said I only wanted to feel appreciated again. I said the kiss meant nothing and that I loved him. He listened quietly, not interrupting, not comforting. When I finished, he said he wasn't questioning whether I loved the idea of our marriage. He was questioning whether I ever respected him inside it. And he said respect was the part he couldn't live without. I wiped my face angrily, telling him we could work through this if he'd just let go of the legal nonsense. He shook his head. He said these documents weren't a threat. They were boundaries, and boundaries weren't negotiable. I tried to say the kids needed us together. He said the kids needed stability more than they needed a performance of togetherness. The word performance hit me hard. I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could, Milo and Tessa ran into the kitchen asking what we were doing. Thomas smiled at them gently and said we were having an adult conversation. They hugged him first. They always ran to him first lately. After he put them back to bed, he returned to the table. He placed one last document in front of me, a neutral summary written by the legal advisor, outlining next steps if we chose to proceed. He said he wasn't making any decisions tonight. He said the papers were not meant to scare me, only to clarify where we stood. Then he said the words that took the air from my lungs. I want fairness, and I want peace. Peace. The word landed like a closing door. I tried to say something, anything, but my voice wouldn't come out. Thomas gathered the papers calmly and placed them back on the counter. He said I could read them again tomorrow if I wanted. He said everything from this point forward needed to be discussed with clarity, not emotion. I asked if this meant he was done with me. He said it meant he was done being unsure. He turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs without looking back. His footsteps were steady, almost gentle, and somehow that made it worse. There was no anger in his movements, no hesitation, just quiet resolve. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the dim outline of the documents, realizing something terrible. He wasn't threatening to leave. He was preparing to live without me. And for the first time, he wasn't giving me a chance to change the story. The moment I understood that, the story ended, not because he punished me, but because he no longer needed to.